What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 9 of the iKONIC podcast. Coming up on our 10th episode, which is going to be a very special episode. We have a very big guest. I'll say one of our biggest guests, wouldn't you say?
100%.
Who's actually in the food realm. He's into cooking. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the iKONIC podcast if you're not already, to, of course, stay on top of that episode. But I wanted to get today's episode started by asking you, Conrad, like, now that you're back in the States, finally getting settled, let's jump right into it. What are your future plans in terms of traveling? You got any other spots that are high on your list that you want to hit?
I think I already said it in one of the episodes, but I always was excited with Greenland and how everything looked in there, how like off the grid it was. So I definitely want to go to Greenland one day or another, probably sooner rather than later. But other than that, for this year, probably there's maybe not that many plans that I have. Maybe I would like to see Aruba at some point for like a weekend or like a week getaway. But
The Caribbean's always nice.
the Caribbean, I love these spots. I've been to Aruba, one of my favorite vacations. I definitely want to go back there.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to get back out to the Caribbean. I've only spent a small amount of time there, but it's a fascinating little corner of the world where there are a lot of different cultures mingling in, like I said, such a short area. Anyway, I'm actually planning with my girl to do a trip to Albania and Montenegro because that's just a part of Europe that we've never experienced. Oh, wow. And I've only heard good things. I heard Albania, as we said in one of the last episodes with Amber, is like the new Croatia. Croatia's already overrun with tourists. Greece has been overrun with tourists for years.
Yeah.
Albania is kind of that one of those last hidden gems on the Mediterranean there that haven't been explored, yet still maintain a lot of that Maldives type beaches, which is something that I'm looking forward to a lot.
Actually, I've heard that Montenegro is actually very, very beautiful and like very kind of underrated place. Like, not that many people even can point it at the map.
It's very true. Montenegro is a very small country, and from what I understand, that's a very big stop for a lot of like yachts and cruise ships.
Oh, yeah.
They all go through there. So Montenegro, Albania, definitely looking forward to that. They in that area they have countries like Macedonia, they have Bulgaria, a lot of places that I know little to nothing about. Now, that actually just brings something to my mind. Have you heard about the German tourist that went missing in like 2014 in Bulgaria? Have you heard about that story?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Dude, so get this. Guy from Germany goes on vacation with a couple of his buddies to Bulgaria.
Okay.
Now, while he's out there, he finds himself in a fight with a couple of guys at a bar. In fact, the guy actually apparently ruptured his like eardrum, among other things.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so the doctors were saying to him, yo, like, we don't think it's a good idea for you to fly with a ruptured eardrum for obvious reasons. That's going to be excruciatingly painful.
Oh, yeah.
And they advised that you might even want to go home over land. Now, this story, though, dude, it's got some very peculiar details, which is why I wanted to talk about it on the pod at some point in time. I actually, just a couple months ago, went down like a crazy rabbit hole on this case. But get this. Guy's advised not to fly home. Winds up spending a couple extra days in Bulgaria. And while the guy's trying to leave several days later, he's in the airport and he suddenly experiences a psychotic break. And while he's getting checked by like the doctor at the airport, the guy makes a run for it. He runs for the door. By the way, at this point, the guy's going through stuff. Following his ruptured eardrum, his buddies were saying that he started acting a little weird on the trip. He started having some mental issues. And I'm sure there are other details that we don't know. One being that I heard the resort that he was staying at was like a big party resort. He could have potentially been doing drugs and other things. But anyway, he was pretty much not in the right state of mind. Now, think about this. The guy's in the airport. He's getting checked by the doctor, getting ready to board his flight to return to Germany. The guy has a psychotic break, runs out of the airport, jumps a fence with barbed wire. Get ready for the craziest part of the story. The guy's never seen again.
What?
His family has zero clue to where he is. They've created a Facebook page dedicated to finding this guy. And anyone that's sent tips to the guy's mother over the years, pretty much saying like he could potentially be out here, they're posted on that group. but it's insane to think. It's just like those missing person stories are just insane because it's hard to fathom that someone just disappears off the face of the earth per se.
Wait, so it was like 10 years ago?
2014, and the guy has still not been found. Now, listen, here's the kicker. Now, look, as we've said many times on the pod, people conspire about tons of things on the internet, but this one did make a bit of sense to me, and people were ultimately saying that he very well may have been a victim of organ trafficking. Like the state of mind that he was in, he clearly wasn't well. If he met up with the wrong person, think about this. Organs in your body, they're going for thousands of dollars a piece. That's why you have to be very careful when you sign your organ donor card, because let's just say you're in a situation where you're mangled / it's going to be a lot of work to keep you alive. God only knows what's going to happen. I have trust issues as it is, but you can only imagine how that could be with the organs. And the reason people are conspiring about that is because apparently Bulgarian police were not cooperating with German authorities, and there was some footage from the airport that was actually deleted. No. So it's a terribly tragic story, but it's just insane to think how these people can just go missing. People were saying, "Oh, listen, maybe he's living out in solitude somewhere in the forest." But if you look at the airport that he was at, there are no forests for several miles, from what I understand. So he had to have passed through some town at some point in time, perhaps met up with the wrong people. But again, just like Bulgaria, Macedonia, fascinating places that I don't know much about.
Wait, so basically, like, is there a footage that he was, jumping through the wire and like running away, or?
Good point. You brought up something I definitely wanted to mention in this piece. The last time he was seen was the CCTV footage of him running out of the airport, jumping the fence, never seen again.
That's crazy.
It's honestly fucking insane.
But as you said, it could be human trafficking. He might have already been like dead. Like, who knows? Like, there could be many things that have happened. And
listen, so the guy's friends were saying that for quite some time he was acting very strange following the fight. Like he wasn't eating. He was staying very distant to them. Could have potentially been doing drugs as well. And that leads me to believe that we don't know what this guy could have potentially been involved with. He could have been a great guy. Maybe he was involved in something because apparently he got into a fight with some people.
Yeah.
He's in a country where he's not from. And ultimately, he saw someone walk into the airport, and that was the moment that he had the psychotic break and took off from the airport and jumped the fences and was never seen again. No one ever heard from the guy again. So, and it's just crazy to think that, let's just say the guy did perhaps die somewhere. How was his body never recovered? Dude,
I feel like there's so many missing person stories that go like unexplained for like years, and I feel like the longer it takes, obviously the smaller chances that they're gonna ever give the explanation to what happened.
And I think that down the line, some more things that we should just incorporate in the pod in general are some of these stories, some of these true crime stories, because these are things that people just love to hear about, and it really hits that curiosity bone in your body, if I could say that. It makes people wonder about a lot of things.
Dude, after we finish it up, I'm going to go home. I'm going to research on that.
Yeah, the guy's name was, I want to say Matt something, but there's literally a Facebook page dedicating to finding this guy. But Bulgaria is known for all sorts of crazy shit. You heard about the bride markets, right?
No.
Dude, so get this. So, obviously we've spoken about this in the past. I don't know the political correct name for them, whether it's Romani or Gypsy, but they're a population of people that live all throughout Europe. But specifically in Bulgaria, from what I understand, 4 times per year, they have a bride market where pretty much people are selling their daughters off to other men. And if I'm not mistaken, the group of these people, they're called like the Kalaiji or something like that.
Dude, that's fucking wild, bro.
It really is wild, but for people like us living in the U.S., it's almost unfathomable that things like this... Imagine, 2024, present-day Europe, this stuff is still going on.
That's insanity. Like, literally, it's like 21st century, and like this is still happening.
Bro,
we have like robots walking here, and like the freaking...
The world is honestly a crazy place, and I feel like lately it's just been one shitty thing after the next. Like, you obviously just recently heard about that flood that happened in Dubai where like supercars were underwater.
Bro, that was crazy. That was like, I think, the biggest. Oh, they got as much rainfall as they usually get in like within a 2-year time span, and they got it in like 1 day.
Isn't that insane?
Like, it just makes me wonder, like, maybe like they used some like cloud seeding, they were using some like type of techniques, or like
It very well could have been, and it's funny you'd mention that because I actually saw several news articles pointing to that fact that it could have potentially been cloud seeding, excuse me. And people that say that that doesn't exist, I think that's pretty ignorant, because from what I understand, cloud seeding's been going on since like the 60s.
Dude, like I feel like the technique was first found even like in 40s.
The 40s even?
Yeah, I think it's started even in 40s. So imagine how much the technique could have developed since 40s.
Oh yeah.
It's been like 80 years.
It's so true.
So like look how fast everything's progressing right now within like months. So like in 80 years, look how much could have progressed.
That technological curve is crazy.
Dude, that makes me just like think right now. I don't know. You obviously you know about like a Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So what happened over there? It was called like Operation Popeye. So obviously like US had a hard time in Vietnam. You know, the war went like for like 20 years or almost 20 years, and because of it wasn't like really like a frontline war. It was more of like kind of war inside of like a dense jungle, almost like dense forest.
Yeah.
So all the Vietnamese, they had a lot of tunnels, hospitals, like everything was like underground.
They had the lay of the land, similar to like what the U.S. dealt with in Afghanistan. They were never able to actually beat the Afghanis just because of the terrain.
It was like very tough to like actually face them like in an actual battle,
Exactly.
because they were like, you know, all the time under the ground. They like knew they had tunnels to everywhere, like this way. So, you know, just the only way to actually like fight with them was like to basically do the cloud seeding and like extend the monsoon season. And by extending the monsoon season, they basically disrupted their army. They disrupted the deliveries of artillery and everything else. So basically, that was like the only ways that they could have won against them.
That's insane. And from what I understand, they didn't even win against the Vietnamese in the end.
Yeah, no, they didn't. But like that was the only way for them to actually like put up a fight, because they had such a hard time with like how fast they were and like how all the tunnel work was like designed and everything. And even for like 5, 10, 15 years after the war, like everyone was denying that the cloud seeding took place. But finally, after like years, they're like,
as they declassified documents and
exactly,
things like
they were
that.
like, okay, like that happened.
It surfaced. That's insane. I feel like there's so many technological breakthroughs. And I, like you said, I know this is something that's been going on for the 40s, but since the 40s. But think about, for example, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about this Colossal. You know about Colossal, the de-extinction company?
I've heard of them, but I don't know much about it. Yeah.
So, and by the way, guys, I'm not a scientific expert by any means. So, of course, give this a search on your own, and of course, develop your own opinion before you just come to any conclusions. I feel like that's another big problem nowadays is a lot of people, they hear one person's opinion on TikTok and suddenly that becomes their reality. So, like I said, do your own research. But from what I understand, Colossal is a de-extinction company, and they've been working to bring back species of animals through genes or DNA, and they have a lot of top, very well-respected scientists working for the company, one even being Forrest Gallant, who's an absolute legend. I genuinely enjoyed watching his Joe Rogan podcast and hearing about all his crazy adventures. Shout out to Forrest Gallant. But anyway, Colossal, just going back to that,
Yeah.
they're looking to bring back animals like the Tasmanian tiger or the Tasmanian devil, and they're looking to bring back the woolly mammoth. And this is what I found to be very interesting. The way they're going to do that is by doing a gene split, and it's going to be like 45% of woolly mammoth DNA that they have on hand, with 55% of like an Asian or Indian elephant, because that is currently the closest living relative to what the woolly mammoth was.
Yeah, 100%.
And I heard that even by this year, now I'm hearing potentially by 2027, they're looking to reintroduce these species into the wild. I think they were going to start bringing the mammoths into like some very sparsely populated area of Siberia. But it's going to be insane to think about how these animals interact with the ecosystems that are currently in place today.
So that's what I'm saying. Like that's how fast the technology is progressing. So like when I think about this, I'm like, goddamn, like what can possibly happen in like 30, 40, 50 years?
It's insane.
Like if you see them like being able to bring back the species that died like 100 years ago.
Look, our kids, if we do have them, God willing, they are going to live in a totally different reality than we live in. I mean, everything is going to be different. They're going to be like this. Hey, listen, Conrad's son's going to come over today. Boom, the kid's going to teleport. It sounds insane and unfathomable to us now, but that if like we spoke about the story about Antonio Piccinino several episodes back, but a guy that was like pretty much 100 years old in southern Italy, he pretty much discovered what the internet was like 3-4 years ago, and he couldn't even believe that he was seeing my brother on a video chat. He didn't believe that my brother was actually in America while he was in Italy. But if you guys are interested in that, we'll like throw a card up above or put it somewhere in the description section if you do want to go back and check out that episode.
So actually, like just to bring it back for a second to cloud seeding, right?
Yeah.
You've heard about the Chernobyl disaster, right?
Absolutely.
How the reactor exploded.
Yep.
So it was like 1986. Like one of the days I was just researching that on Google, and what stood up to me was that actually that was one of the situations where cloud seeding was used and then actually confirmed. So what happened was it was like 1986, and after the reactor exploded, there were like projections that the radioactive cloud is moving towards Moscow, towards like Nizhny Novgorod, and like when Russian authorities saw it, they were like, we have to do something, because when a cloud moves over like the Moscow, and like, you know, they were expecting some like rain because of like the...
Oh my God, Conrad, can I tell you something?
Yep.
Now look, I could be wrong with this. If I'm not mistaken, I met a Russian kid like several years back. His name was like Alexander, typical Russian name. But he had like very thin hair, and on top it was largely bald. And if I'm not mistaken, he was telling me something along the lines of that comes from a type of acidic rain in certain parts of Russia. Again, I could be wrong with this, but it makes sense from what you're telling me about the cloud seeding and the radiation. And I'm just connecting the dots in my head, and I'm like, holy crap, like that could very well be a thing.
Yeah, but so let me just get back to the story real quick. So what happened was, like, you know, the radioactive cloud was moving from Ukraine like towards Belarus, and then it was supposed to end up around Moscow territory, right? And it was supposed to rain, and then all the radioactive fallout would just go on Moscow and like literally like destroy like miles and miles of territory. So what happened was, like, Russian authorities just decided that they're gonna, you know, take their airplanes, they're gonna load the artillery shells with silver iodide, and they just, you know, gonna flew over the clouds that were currently over Belarus,
disperse it,
and they just, you know, shot the jets of the silver iodide into the clouds, and next day you see Belarus, and it's like raining the radioactive fallout. So to protect themselves, they, you know, shot the jets of silver iodide into the clouds and make it rain over Belarus. And when it rained, I'm telling you, like, all this fallout went right into the ground, right in the soil. And from the rain, in like 15 or 20 mile radius, like everything was like destroyed. People that were there like either died or like they got some like modified like a gene modifications because of the fallouts, because of the what happened, you know,
God
in Chernobyl.
Damn. That's insane, and it makes a lot of sense to me, because from what I understand, not a large part, but a big chunk of Belarus is part of that radiation zone. And if I'm not mistaken, people living within that area, because today there are people currently inhabiting that area, they're receiving money from the government. Take that as you will. I'm sure it's like a very small sum of money, but they're actually receiving some sort of money for living in these radiated areas. Someone fact check me on that, leave a comment down below. But you know what's funny, like the babushkas, the Russian babushkas, they're going out in the forest still picking the mushrooms. Like you said, that terrain is probably largely soiled, but they know what to pick and what not to pick.
But you know, from actually speaking on that, I've heard that until now all the radiation and like all these fallouts is still in the soil. So like any like mushrooms or stuff you would pick from the ground in this like a territory, like it's basically poisonous.
Oh, I believe it.
And so right now it's like called Belarus exclusion zone or something like that, and it's basically like the radioactive zone that they have in Belarus is even bigger than they have in Ukraine.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. And it's the only reason I know about this is because there's one YouTuber that I love. He goes to all the former Soviet countries, bald and bankrupt, and he did several episodes in Belarus, and he's exposing / showing all these different radiation zones, and it's fascinating. It's insane how this happened.
And you know what's crazy is like for I don't know, like 20 or 30 years, this zone was like closed to like tourists and stuff like that. It's maybe just recently, a few years ago, maybe I don't know, 5-10 years ago, they actually opened it for
make some money
for like tours.
Yeah.
And it's only like it's very like strict to be able to like visit these areas. Like you need all these permits and everything.
Isn't that insane that like we've spoken about this before, that every part of the world tries to make money off of whatever they have in their area, and here you go, even like radioactive territory they're making tours to. And from what I understand, a lot of people like want to see these places.
Yeah.
But wasn't there like one or maybe even up to like 10 people still residing in the Chernobyl area of Ukraine up until just recently? Like I think like the last one might have just died off like very recently.
Dude, very possibly.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
But all this like modifications that their body got because of the, you know, like all this like a radioactive fallout, like, you know, it could never be reversed, and like their kids would still like, you know, have something different in them because of that. I'm sure
that's changed a lot of things in that area, and I'm definitely going to be doing even more research into that, just out of pure curiosity.
And listen to this. And speaking of that, when I was reading about that, you know, cloud seeding in like, you know, Belarus, Russia stuff, like, you know, I get into like this dark rabbit hole, you know, like when you just get into something that you just go for like hours and hours and hours on like Reddit, on like
Exactly.
I looked into that story. Also happened in 1986. I think it's just because I researched the 1986 year. That's what it showed me too.
Yeah.
So it happened in Cameroon. It was the place where it happened was called Lake Nyos. So what happened was the lake was formed in like a volcano crater. So obviously these lakes are like a little bit different than like other lakes because they're kind of like more still than other ones. There's not so much movement in these lakes. So I saw a story from like one of the doctors that would visit the villages around. Like he would, you know, walk there every day and like come back home to like different village and stuff like that. And one day he came to the village. Next thing he sees is like everyone's just dead on the ground. Everyone is dead. There's like hundreds of people dead. Cattle dead. Insects dead. There was nothing in there. Everyone was just dead. Like it just some like evil
serious?
came and like everyone just got killed. Like obviously
Was it like a plague or something, or?
So that's what they initially thought. But what happened was like in the lakes like that, there's a lot of times what happens is that CO2 just goes on like the bottom of the lake. Like the lake becomes oversaturated with CO2. And what happened was something like provoked like almost like an explosion in the lake. So the lake exploded. You know, the fountain of like 100 or 200 meters, you know, high went up and released all that gas, all that CO2. And there was so much CO2 that was saturated inside of the lake.
Oh my God.
That the gas came and like basically wiped everything within like 15-20 mile radius. So everyone that was next to this lake got so much CO2 in a moment that like, you know, they just like died in a second.
That's absolutely insane.
So in all that area, I think it was 1,700 people that like died. You know, all the wildlife died. I'm telling you, like there was not even insects on top of the people. No insects. The insects died too.
Even the insects died too. Holy
Everything.
Shit.
I think in the closest lake.
That's hilarious. You go. There weren't even insects on people.
Yeah.
They died too.
Like the closest village, I think out of 800 people, only 6 survived. And I saw like one of the people that survived. He was like, in a moment, like, you know, I heard like kind of like a loud noise outside. He was like, I got up from my room, I started walking to the kitchen, and next thing you know, I smelled like something very bad, like very distinct smell. And he was like, next thing you know, I'm losing my consciousness, I'm on the ground. So, you know, next day, like he woken up and like he saw, you know, everyone just like passed.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story, bro. That's insane. And Africa has a lot of like things that we don't know about. Like from what I understand, I think it's like northern Congo. There's like a lot of very remote villages that even people from that area will not visit because they believe that like some of those rivers and lakes are haunted by this massive sea monster that's called like Mokolo Mbembe. You've heard about that obviously, right? But it's crazy, dude. Africa is a fascinating place. But, you know, as we've spoken about before, with the rise of tech, everywhere is pretty much becoming more and more accessible, and more places are bending their ways to be more Western, which is something that I don't really like because I feel like a lot of countries are losing that nice cultural
kind of like
distinction. Exactly right. Like if you go to a country like Germany, for example, right? German culture's gone. There's so many foreigners in Germany that the typical German village that you're thinking about, there's other people living in them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no. Like, I feel like it's, listen, like, urbanization, like, hit the entire world, and, like, everything is just starting to look alike and alike and alike. So you really have to go to, like, these off-the-grid places to actually something, like, entirely different.
It's so true. It's so true. But even to that point, like, I can't even really name any countries where there's not people on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. Like,
I mean, obviously, like...
at this point, but we say obviously, but the crazy thing is, if you look back like 20 to 30 years ago, that was not the case at all. There were way more off the beaten path, undiscovered places on. Now, if you go on like Lonely Planet or TripAdvisor, you can go to the most isolated village on earth. There will still be an inn or a guest house or something there.
Unless you go to North Sentinelese.
Unless you go to North Sentinelese. That's one of the only spots that probably does not have any sort of tourist infrastructure.
I don't think there's a guest house there, so...
Definitely not. I heard the locals are very friendly over there and stuff.
Yeah, very. I wouldn't try, though. Don't try that at home.
Yeah, don't try this at home, kids.
And you know what's funny with the... with the lake, so the lake I told you about, there's another lake that's kind of like that. It's called, I think, Lake Kivu. And it's either in Cameroon or Kenya. I'm not sure which country. But the lake is much, much bigger than the Lake Nyos that I told you about. And when they found out that there's also like the same pattern, like that, it's kind of like getting saturated with the CO2, they had to like install something like like a giant straw almost to let the kind of release the pressure from like the bottom of the lake.
That's insane.
Because otherwise, it would just literally like, one of the days it would just like explode and like literally like wipe everyone in like, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 mile radius.
It would do the same thing that happened to those 1700
but on like a much
people.
bigger scale.
Yeah. Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah, so even like what happened with the Lake Nile, like they didn't know what happened for I think like months or like years even, just because again back then the technology wasn't so advanced. It was again 1986.
They probably thought it was like
they thought they were like evil spirits.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, like if you go to the town, like no one has any wounds, like you don't see any rashes on no one, like cattle is dead, like insects are dead, like they just thought it was like evil spirits.
Can you imagine stumbling across that? That would be like the biggest WTF moment in your entire life.
So imagine like you're one of these guys like that survived, and like you wake up, next thing you know, and everyone around you is dead. Everything is dead.
Question for you, like just kind of in the same vein of things. Do you believe in ghosts or things of that nature?
That's a tough question, honestly. I kind of go back and forth on that. I feel like sometimes I think and I feel like there could be like a ghost presence somewhere, because you have like all these houses that are kind of like just very strange. Like you get all this like strange feeling in them, or I don't know. I feel like it is possible, but do I 100% believe that it's happening? Like I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. Similar to what you said, I go back and forth on the matter too. For me, it's more of a thing of I kind of believe in, if this makes any sense, like energy versus like if I don't know, if that book fell right there. There's some people that right away would be like, oh, like that's Aunt Gianna, and it's like I don't know if I necessarily believe that entirely. I get people want to keep that relationship with people that have passed on, but I don't, like you said, I don't know if I believe specifically in like ghosts. There hasn't been enough proof in front of me for me to be like, damn, like that's for sure a thing.
Yeah, no. Like honestly, I live by the standard that I kind of like have to see something or see like proof for something to actually believe it. Agreed. So unless I see like unless something happens to me that I'm like almost convinced that was like, let's say, ghost or like energy activity, then otherwise I'm still gonna kind of doubt it, Yep. I feel like it could be a thing, but again, I don't know it.
I remember like growing up, I watched like 1,000 episodes of like Ghost Hunters, for example, and they almost never found anything. Like maybe there would be like a voice on a recording or something like that.
But sometimes when you like, let's say, research, and there are these houses like everywhere around the world that apparently are haunted. So I wonder, like, if let's say if you went there, would you like feel any different? Would you like maybe hear something, feel like presence? So maybe that would be something to like make you actually make your mind.
Yeah, it would, and I feel like it would also put you in a different state of mind where you're more inclined to believe something, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is I was just doing some reading. There's actually an island right in like the area of the canals of Venice that is actually like totally abandoned. There's like an abandoned mental hospital on there.
Yeah.
And similar to what we're talking about, now there's tourists going there too, like everywhere else on Earth.
Of course there are.
But yeah, there's definitely some places that I believe give off like a really creepy, weird vibe. But yeah, maybe I'd be saying something different if I had to spend the night in like one of those places, you know.
But I also feel like at this point, if you let's say no, or like if everyone tells you that the place is haunted and like, oh, expect this and this, it's almost like your mind is gonna make up all this happening.
You already have preconceived notions going into
exactly. Even if there will be nothing, your brain still will make you believe that you feel presence, just because like when you're thinking about it, and like it kind of makes you believe it almost.
And then you're gonna hear like a crack in the floor. You're gonna lose your shit.
Kind of like a placebo almost, you know.
Exactly right. Well said. But you know, something else I did want to talk about a little bit on this episode, since it's kind of just you and I here.
Yeah.
Is some of our future plans for the pod.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously one thing that we're very focused on going forward is landing some big guests for you guys. Because at the end of the day, we know that we're both awesome people. No, I'm only kidding. But we know that we're awesome people. But we're looking to honestly make the best type of content for our viewers, obviously. So if there's anyone that you know in the North Jersey, New York area, that's where we're based out of, or any smaller influencers that you think we could potentially land, leave them down in the comment section. We'd be more than happy to get an episode with them. But something else we were thinking about too is kind of making a shift and creating shorter podcast episodes, because let's be real, with the TikTokification of social media, people don't have an attention span for longer than I would say 15 seconds.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's very, very tough. Unless you have some like big names, people like have a hard time listening to something for like hour, 2 hours. Like I feel like it's close to impossible.
It's close to impossible. Like there are very few podcasts that I can do that with, and I'm a podcast guy, and it has to be like a very good guest. So obviously we're gonna focus more going forward on like clips and things like that. But we were thinking about trying. I'm curious to know you guys' opinion. How it would be if we started dropping like 35 to 45 minute podcast episodes. Obviously, when we have some good guests on the scene, we're going to make it like an hour and a half, no problem. But I think that it's going to be a good idea, and the audience is going to generally enjoy those shorter podcast episodes. It's way more digestible. You could listen to it on your drive to work. You could listen to it at the gym.
Exactly, like 30 minutes, I feel like that's
like the perfect length. Maybe even like if you want to say 40 minutes is perfect. But to sit down for an hour and a half, I feel like at some point you're just kind of
as you say, like kind of
struggling for substance.
Listen, the world is changing, and like I guess the way people think, the pace of life is changing too. Like everything is just faster. So at some point you just gotta go with the flow.
It's so true. We're gonna try to adjust to like how the world is changing, like you said. But I think that in general we have a lot of good things coming for iKONIC. We also obviously we love Blue Yeti, but we're not on that level yet where we're using like the best of the best equipment. If you guys do want to support the channel, of course you can, but at this point we're going to focus on getting better cameras, better microphones, making the set look better. This way you guys just have an overall better experience, right?
100%. And just to bring it back real quick for a second, when we're talking about ghosts and like all that energy stuff, right? I don't know, like have you ever like give a thought to like reincarnation?
Good one, bro. I don't know. I definitely think it could be possible. And there are some crazy stories from around the world where you hear stories of, oh, this person remembers their former life, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's impossible, but kind of what we were saying before about the seeing is believing type thing, it's very hard for me to believe. If reincarnation is a thing, I obviously have zero recollection of any past life, anything like that.
Yeah, so obviously not everyone has the recollection, and I know this kind of came from like the left field for you, but I was always like a big fan of like Dr. Ian Stevenson. So actually that's like one of the most popular people, or like most recognizable people that took care of like the reincarnation. He even wrote his book, 20 cases that prove reincarnation. I've read parts of the book, but it was like back like maybe 5-10 years ago. It was almost impossible to get it in Poland. Like I could never find it anywhere.
Really?
And at that point also my English wasn't that good. So I had a tough time to like get through all this information, but I did a lot of research over time. And there's been really like hundreds, if not thousands of cases where kids, mostly kids, some teenagers too, but it's mostly kids, would remember their like past life.
Oh yeah.
And like, that doctor with like his crew, he would literally like go all over the world would speak to the kids, speak to the families, and actually try to verify what was happening. And there were, let's say, many instances where, he would meet a kid, and the kid would be telling the doctor and like everyone about like his past life. It would be like, oh, I was living in this town. My house, let's say, was white. It was like a red door.
Like very, very creepy, spot on details.
There was a lot of details that you would think like that are almost like impossible to know.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he would like tell the details. Oh, I had a sister. My sister, let's say, had a curly hair. I had a brother. Brother died in like a car accident. Let's say, when I was a little, stuff like that, right? So they would drive to these towns and actually try to verify these things. And I've seen many, many situations where they would drive to the town, try to verify that, and maybe not every single thing was spot on. But let's say 80% of the staff would actually be spot on. It would be like, oh, that's the house. It has a red door. As he said, like, oh, the layout of the house was okay. There was room, kitchen, and like bathroom here. There was another room. This room had like a bed in this corner, stuff like that. They would go to the house and just literally almost everything would match.
Everything would be the same way you said.
And that's almost like, again, that's impossible to know, because again, let's say the town was 100 miles away, and it was in the times of like early 2000 or 19, let's say 90s, where it was like actually tough to travel from, let's say, it was like in India, hard to travel from this town to this town for, let's say, 100 miles away.
Yeah.
So like the details that they were able to give, like they even let some of these kids meet their families from the previous life.
Yeah.
Because let's say his sister was still alive, she was 70. So even the sister, when she was listening to some of the details that like the kid was giving about their life and everything, she was like, almost everything matches up.
It's insane. And it's not something that's totally far-fetched, because I saw there was like a trend on TikTok not too long ago where it was like a guy and he's like, tell me the craziest thing that your kid has ever said to you. And this one lady's like, I don't know if it was son or daughter. She's like, so my daughter has been telling me that she's from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have like a little globe or whatever, and she was looking at the map and she points to like a very small town and she's like, yo, that's where I'm from. And granted, kids say things all the time.
Yeah.
But it's very weird for someone to be like, yo, I'm originally from this country, or I believe that I'm from this country, and point to like a small town that might be out in like Yakutia, Russia.
Yeah.
Some things are just would be a little bit too coincidental.
Yeah.
But that's a very good question, and I think that's something that we're going to explore even more
in the further episodes.
In the further episodes, because honestly speaking, like I do have to do some more digging on that myself. I want to, like we said about the seeing is believing, I want to get more substance.
Yeah.
Again,
some of these things might seem very improbable, but I truly believe that all that knowledge has to come from somewhere. Because again, as I brought up the situation where they even reunited the kid with his sister from like the previous life, he was able to even like name people like, oh, let's say he was like, we had a brother, his name was, let's say, Oscar, and then like she would like verify this, like, he actually wasn't our brother, but he was our cousin, and like, he would explain the way he looked, and he was like looked exactly the same way.
That's crazy.
So again, not every detail was 100% correct, but like all the smaller things that he added, all the names and names of the towns, or like kind of like an order of things happening, was like matching.
It was matching.
So
right?
There's no way you just randomly, kid sleeps and then like he dreams about it and then like he says, like,
absolutely not.
I almost believe there have to be some grounds for that.
God damn. It very well may be a thing, bro. It very well, and I know that there are a lot of religions that like live by it,
Mm-hmm.
like the idea of reincarnation.
There was a time I used to do like a lot of research about that, and again I digested so much stuff. I forgot some of it. I definitely have to refresh myself, like, reading that book again and actually reading it from the beginning to the end. But I want to like go more in depth on that, because I feel like that's a very interesting topic, and like to hear all the stories like makes you think about everything around you.
I think the viewers are gonna like that. I think that we have to include some conversations about that down the line, and as I mentioned before, some of those true crime related.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the things with the pod right now is we're 1% struggling with a pure identity, and by that I mean, obviously we love to have conversations on travel related things or more unknown, obscure facts, but I feel like we also don't want to keep ourselves too limited to, let's just say, one specific topic. But it's interesting because if you look at some podcasts, for example, like I think Flagrant, Andrew Schultz, I think his podcast, I could be wrong, but I think it's categorized as like a sports podcast. But whenever I watch Flagrant, it's never for something sports related. It's always like, oh, he's got Rogan on the pod.
Yeah.
Or he has some guest that I'm curious to see what they're going to talk about. And I feel like once you grow yourself to a point where you have a solid audience, you can then dive into these different types of combos. But I'm very happy with how things have been going for the podcast so far. We've just hit 1,200 subscribers, which, although it might not sound like a lot, it's a pretty big milestone for both Conrad and myself. So if you haven't already joined the iKONIC journey, make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube. Give the video a thumbs up. And, of course, leave your opinions down in the comment section. We love to have conversations with you guys.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. As Nick said, next episode we're going to have a very good guest. So stay tuned for that.
Take care, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care.
Take care.